What if one quiet thought, born in an ordinary mind, could change the course of a life forever? Not a miracle, not luck, just a single idea, believed in so deeply that the world had no choice but to bend to it. Story begins. It was late evening in a small Midwestern town. The kind of town where dreams often faded before they ever had a chance to grow. Tom Walker sat on his porch, staring at the half-empty coffee cup in his hand. His job at the auto shop barely covered rent. The radio hummed softly inside his house, repeating the same discouraging headlines: layoffs, rising prices, and the usual talk about how hard life's gotten. Tom sighed. Maybe that's just the way it is, he muttered, but just as he leaned back, something inside him whispered, a quiet, unfamiliar thought. What if it doesn't have to be? It was a small question. But that night, it was the spark. The stranger's lesson. The next morning, while waiting for his bus, Tom met an older man named Mr. Harris, a retired entrepreneur who carried himself with calm confidence. His suit wasn't new, but his eyes had the fire of someone who'd seen success up close. "You look like a man who's thinking too small," Mr. Harris said with a grin. Tom frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm just trying to get by." "That's exactly the problem," the old man replied. "Most folks spend their lives trying to get by instead of trying to build something. The size of your life will always match the size of your thinking." He paused, then added, "You ever heard of Henry Ford?" "Sure. Built cars. Rich man. Ford once said, 'Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.' That's not just clever talk, son. That's how the mind works. You see, success starts long before money shows up. It starts in your thoughts." The spark of change. That line stuck with Tom. He couldn't shake it. All day at the garage, as he changed tires and fixed engines, the words repeated in his head. The size of your life will always match the size of your thinking. He began to wonder, what if he stopped thinking about surviving and started thinking about building? What if the men he admired, the business owners, the innovators, the people with purpose, weren't luckier than him, but simply thought bigger? That night, he sat down with a notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Think. Believe. Build. He didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but he felt something powerful shift inside him. The power of a thought. Days passed, and Tom started noticing something new. When he looked around, he saw opportunity where he used to see struggle. He realized that the customers who came into his shop didn't just need repairs, they needed trust. They wanted someone who treated them fairly, explained things simply, and cared about their safety. That was when it hit him. If I opened my own repair shop, one that people actually trusted, I could build something real. The idea scared him at first. Who was he to dream that big? He had no savings, no fancy degree, and no family money. But then he remembered Mr. Harris's words. Success starts long before money shows up. It starts in your thoughts. Napoleon Hill's hidden law. Tom didn't know it yet, but he was walking the same mental path that Napoleon Hill described in Think and Grow Rich. Hill wrote that everything, from fortunes to inventions to movements, begins as an idea held long enough and strong enough to turn into reality. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, Hill said, it can achieve. Tom decided to test that. Each morning before work, he'd spend 10 minutes imagining his future repair shop. He pictured the sign above the door, Walker Auto Care. He saw happy customers, clean floors, good workers, and the sound of laughter, not complaints. At first, it felt silly. But the more he pictured it, the more real it began to feel. That was the secret. Imagination with belief becomes construction, not fantasy. Faith in motion. Soon, small opportunities began to appear. An old friend selling used equipment. A landlord offering a cheap lease. A neighbor offering help with paperwork. It wasn't magic. It was motion. Tom had shifted from wishing to building. He stopped saying, I can't, and started asking, how can I? And little by little, his life began to follow his thinking. The turning point. One cold morning, Mr. Harris stopped by the garage again. Tom ran up, smiling wide. You were right. I think I'm actually going to do it, open my own place. The old man chuckled. That's good. But remember, thinking big isn't about building castles in the air. It's about seeing the mountaintop and taking the first step today. Tom nodded. Then I guess it's time to take that step. Lesson of Part 1. Every success story begins with a single shift. from doubt to vision, from I can't to what if I can? The rich, the builders, the dreamers, they're not born with more talent. They just refuse to think small. They plant seeds when others are still waiting for harvest. They act while others hesitate. They build while others talk. And like Tom, once you begin to think big, act small, and believe without fear, you stop waiting for luck and start building your own. End of part 1. The seed of $1 million thought. Backhand index pointing right next in part 2. The discipline of belief, where Tom learns that vision without persistence dies in doubt, and how patience turns big dreams into real success. Would you like me to continue with part 2, 1,000 words, in the same story style and tone, continuing Tom's transformation step by step according to Napoleon Hill's principles? Part 2, The Discipline of Belief, inspired by Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, Faith Without Action is Dead. Hook, big dreams don't fail because they're too big. They fail because people stop moving toward them. The difference between wishing and winning is not luck. It's daily, disciplined action. Story begins. The morning sun rose over the small town like a promise waiting to be kept. Tom Walker woke before dawn, a habit he'd forced himself to build. The house was still and quiet. His coffee steamed beside a worn notebook filled with scribbled ideas, goals, and plans for his new dream, his own repair shop. Just a few weeks earlier, he had met Mr. Harris, the retired businessman who taught him the first rule of success. The size of your life will always match the size of your thinking. Now Tom was learning the second law. Thinking big means nothing without moving your feet. The temptation to wait that morning, Tom almost went back to bed. The air was cold, and the thought of another long day at the auto shop pressed on his shoulders. Maybe I'll start working on my business plan this weekend, he told himself. I'm tired. But then he remembered something Mr. Harris once said. The poor man waits for perfect conditions. The rich man builds with what he has. Tom sighed, grabbed his notebook, and forced himself to write. 5 minutes turned into 15. 15 into an hour. By the time the sun fully rose, he had drawn a rough plan for his future garage, equipment list, estimated costs, and a timeline. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. That was the moment he understood. Discipline isn't about motivation. It's about movement. The law of small steps. In the following weeks, Tom practiced this new rule daily. He didn't have investors or fancy tools. But he had effort, and effort, Napoleon Hill said, is the seed of faith in motion. Every morning, he woke early to read something uplifting, biographies of great builders, inventors, and dreamers. Every evening, he saved a few dollars from his paycheck. It wasn't much. But as Hill wrote, success comes to those who become success conscious. Each small act, the reading, the saving, the planning, was training his mind to believe. While others complained about luck, Tom was building habits. While others waited for the right time, Tom was creating it. The lesson from the old garage. One afternoon, as Tom worked under a rusted pickup, his boss grumbled nearby. Kid, why you always scribbling in that notebook? You think you're gonna build some empire out of grease and wrenches? Tom smiled. Maybe I will. The older man shook his head. You need money for that, not dreams. Tom didn't argue. He just kept working. But inside, he remembered another quote from Mr. Harris. The poor man believes he needs resources to act. The rich man acts until resources come. That night, Tom wrote in his journal. Every empire begins with one brick. Every fortune begins with one act of faith. He didn't know it yet, but that single belief, that small beginnings hold great power, would become the foundation of everything he built. The quiet builders. Tom started noticing a pattern. The people who talked the most about success were often the ones who did the least. But those who worked quietly, stayed late, learned new skills, improved themselves, they were the ones who rose over time. He realized something powerful. The rich don't chase attention. They chase progress. They build silently, while others wait to be noticed. They move forward step by step, while others look for shortcuts. Tom promised himself he'd do the same. He began tracking his progress, not in dollars, but in habits. Did I take action today? Did I learn something new? Did I move closer to my vision? He found joy in the process itself. Napoleon Hill called this organized persistence. The art of doing the right thing every day, even when results are invisible. Faith in the grind. One cold February night, the wind howled through his thin apartment walls. Tom sat at his small table, bills piled high beside his notes. Doubt crept in like a chill. Maybe I'm just fooling myself, he whispered. But then he opened his notebook again and read something he had written weeks earlier. Every small step matters. Every act of effort builds belief. He remembered what Mr. Harris said. The seed doesn't grow because people watch it. It grows because it stays planted. Tom smiled. All right then, he said softly. I'll keep planting. He got up, stretched, and went back to work, not on his car, but on himself. Discipline creates power. Months passed, and Tom's quiet routine began to bear fruit. He had saved enough to buy old tools from a closing shop. He found a small, cheap garage for rent on the edge of town. It wasn't much: cracked walls, broken windows, a leaky roof. But to Tom, it looked like a dream finally finding a home. When he opened the doors for the first time, he whispered to himself, "Small start, big vision." He spent the next weeks cleaning, painting, repairing, one step at a time. People laughed at him. Some called him foolish. But Tom remembered Napoleon Hill's warning. Most people are defeated before they start because they think small. He wasn't going to be one of them. The rich man's secret. One evening, Mr. Harris stopped by the new garage. He smiled as he looked around the half-finished space. "You're learning the right way," he said. "Small steps. Big faith. That's how real wealth is built." Tom nodded. "It's slow work." "Good," Mr. Harris said. "Slow builds strength. Fast builds ego. The rich understand that discipline is freedom. When you control your habits, you control your life." Tom thought about that long after Mr. Harris left. He realized that success wasn't something he'd get someday. It was something he was becoming each day. Lesson of Part 2: to think like the rich is to move like the rich, with purpose, patience, and persistence. They know that small goals create small lives, but small actions create great ones. They treat time as a servant, not a master. They build when others talk. They act while others wait. And most of all, they trust that steady effort, guided by faith, always wins. Because in the end, greatness isn't built in bursts of excitement. It's built in seasons of consistency. So start small. Move daily. Build in silence until results make the noise. End of Part 2. The discipline of belief. Backhand index pointing right next in Part 3. The power of persistence, where Tom faces real setbacks, doubt, and failure, and learns how Napoleon Hill's greatest secret, definiteness of purpose, turns struggle into unstoppable momentum. Would you like me to continue with Part 3, 1000 words, keeping Tom's story going with Napoleon Hill's next principles of persistence and purpose? Part 3, The Fire of Failure and the Patience of Power, inspired by Napoleon Hill's. Persistence is to the character of man as carbon is to steel. Hook. Most people stop when life hits them hard. The rich don't. They fall, learn, and rise again, stronger. Because they know the truth: failure isn't the end. It's the beginning of mastery. Story begins. 6 months had passed since Tom opened his small repair garage on the edge of town. The sign above the door read, "Walker Auto Care." But some days, Tom felt like it should read, "Walker's Worries." Business was slow. Some weeks he barely made enough to cover rent and tools. The cold wind slipped through the cracks in the walls, and sometimes, so did doubt. He remembered those early mornings when he'd felt unstoppable, waking before dawn, full of hope and energy. Now, each morning felt heavier. Maybe I made a mistake, he thought, staring at his reflection in the greasy window. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. A visit from the mentor. One afternoon, Mr. Harris stopped by again. His sharp eyes scanned the quiet shop, the empty parking lot, the half-finished car, the man who looked ready to give up. "Tough month?" he asked. Tom sighed. "Tough everything. Feels like I'm trying so hard, but nothing's working. I'm doing all the right things, and it's still not enough." Mr. Harris smiled, not with pity, but with understanding. "Good," he said calmly. Tom frowned. "Good? What's good about failing?" "Because now," Mr. Harris said, "you're finally learning what the rich already know. Failure is not the end of the road, it's part of the road." He pulled up an old wooden stool and sat beside Tom. "Let me tell you something Napoleon Hill taught the world," he said. "Every failure carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, but only for the one who looks for it." He tapped his temple. The benefit's not out there, Tom. It's up here. The mirror of failure. That night, after Mr. Harris left, Tom sat in silence. He replayed his failures in his mind: the customers who never returned, the loan he couldn't get, the nights he went to bed hungry. But this time, instead of feeling angry, he began to ask different questions. What is this teaching me? What do I need to change? How can I turn this pain into progress? And little by little, the answers came. He realized he'd been trying to please everyone, cutting prices, working endless hours, saying yes to every job. But as Hill wrote, a man without a definite purpose drifts until he is lost. Tom had forgotten his purpose: to build a business based on trust and quality, not cheap shortcuts. The failure hadn't come to break him. It had come to refine him. The turning of the mind. The next morning, Tom changed his approach. He raised his prices slightly, focused on service, and treated every customer as if they were the only one in town. He started learning about marketing, finances, and leadership during his lunch breaks. He created a simple rule for himself: I will act whether I feel ready or not. I will do it until I am ready. And he did. Day after day, he showed up. Even when the shop was empty, he kept the doors open. Even when doubt whispered, he answered with work. He began to understand a truth Napoleon Hill repeated again and again: persistence is the power that transforms failure into faith. The pain of the process. Weeks turned into months. Tom still wasn't rich, not even close. But he was growing in ways that couldn't yet be measured in money. He had become calmer, stronger, more focused. He no longer complained about slow progress because he finally saw what was happening beneath the surface. Like a seed pushing roots into the ground before it ever blooms, he was building foundations. One night, while closing the shop, he noticed an old wrench lying on the floor, rusted, bent, forgotten. He picked it up and smiled. That was me, he whispered. Old, stuck, waiting for something to change me. But he had learned something vital: discipline creates readiness. Every day of silent effort was sharpening him, shaping him into the man who could handle success when it finally came. The fire of failure still, the tests didn't stop. One afternoon, a customer accused him of overcharging and left angry. Another day, his main equipment broke, costing him hundreds to fix. Each time, Tom felt that same old wave of frustration. But instead of quitting, he remembered Mr. Harris's words: the rich don't run from failure, they study it. So he studied every setback, what caused it, what it revealed, how he could grow from it. He learned to see failure not as a wall but as a mirror, one that reflected what needed to be improved. Slowly, he began to feel something powerful inside: unbreakable confidence. Not the loud, boastful kind. The quiet kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself. The secret of patience. Then came the hardest lesson: waiting. Business was steady but slow. Tom's savings were thin. His progress was invisible to everyone except himself. One night, sitting in the dark garage, he looked up and whispered, I've done everything right. Why is it taking so long? The silence answered him, and in that silence, he remembered something Napoleon Hill wrote: patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. He realized that greatness isn't built in bursts, it's built in seasons. The rich don't rush time. They work through it. He stopped demanding quick results and started trusting the process. Each day he reminded himself, the roots grow underground before the tree stands tall. He would smile, roll up his sleeves, and get back to work. The reward of endurance. Spring arrived, and with it, change. A well-known local contractor visited the shop for a simple repair. Impressed by Tom's honesty and skill, he offered him a long-term service deal for his company's entire fleet of trucks. Within months, Tom's garage was busier than ever. He hired 2 workers. He upgraded his tools. But more than the money, what filled him with pride was this: he had endured. He had failed, fallen, waited, and kept going. And that endurance became his greatest wealth. When Mr. Harris stopped by and saw the busy shop, he smiled. I see you've learned the secret, he said. Tom nodded. Yeah. Failure doesn't break you. It builds you, if you stay long enough to see the lesson. Mr. Harris laughed. You sound like Napoleon Hill himself. Lesson of Part 3: To think and act like the rich is to walk the long road without losing heart. Failure is not the end, it's feedback. Patience is not weakness, it's power under control. And discipline is not punishment, it's freedom. Most people quit when progress slows. But the rich stay the course. They understand that every seed grows in silence before it blooms in sunlight. Because what is built with patience lasts. What is built in a hurry fades. So stay steady. Fail forward. Trust the unseen. Work. That's how the rich rise, slowly, quietly, and forever. End of part 3. The fire of failure and the patience of power. Backhand index pointing right next in part 4. The power of vision, where Tom learns that persistence means nothing without a clear, burning purpose, and how one powerful idea can transform his future forever. Would you like me to continue with part 4, 1000 words, in the same story style, carrying Tom into Napoleon Hill's next lesson on definiteness of purpose and vision? Title: The Builder's Creed Part 4, The Power of Purpose. A story inspired by the success principles of Napoleon Hill, written in a simple, engaging style for every dreamer ready to think and grow rich. Hook. Ethan stood by the river at dawn, the water glowing gold beneath the rising sun. His business had failed, again. The money was gone, his friends had disappeared, and his dream looked like a cruel joke. For the first time, he wondered if maybe everyone else had been right, maybe success wasn't meant for people like him. But then, a memory echoed in his mind, something his mentor, Mr. Hale, had told him. When you lose money, you lose nothing. But when you lose purpose, you lose everything. Ethan didn't understand it back then. But that morning, with the sound of the river whispering beside him, he was about to discover what those words truly meant. Part 4. The Power of Purpose. For weeks after his failure, Ethan moved through life like a ghost. He woke up late, avoided calls, and replayed his mistakes in his head. One afternoon, he visited Mr. Hale, the old man who had once been a banker, a farmer, and a mentor to many young dreamers in town. Mr. Hale was sitting on his porch, repairing an old wooden chair. When he saw Ethan, he smiled. "Ah, my boy. You look like someone who's been listening to failure's music too long." Ethan sat down quietly. "I don't understand it," he said. "I worked hard. I was disciplined. I stayed patient. But it all fell apart. Maybe I'm just not built for success." Mr. Hale stopped working. "You're looking at the wrong thing, Ethan. The question isn't why it failed. The question is why you started." Ethan frowned. "I started because I wanted to be successful." "Wrong," Mr. Hale said firmly. "That's a result, not a reason." He leaned forward. "Tell me, if the world took away every dollar you could ever earn, would you still chase your dream?" Ethan hesitated. I'm not sure." "Then you don't have a dream," the old man said. "You have a wish. And wishes fade. Purpose doesn't." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The words burned in his mind. Wishes fade. Purpose doesn't. He thought of the men and women he admired, those who built businesses, empires, legacies. None of them chased wealth for its own sake. They chased an idea, a mission, a fire inside them. Wealth came because of that, not for it. He remembered reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Hill had written, "A definite purpose backed by burning desire is the starting point of all achievement." Maybe that's what he was missing, definite purpose. Ethan had been chasing success without asking why he wanted it. He had wanted comfort, recognition, approval, all things that fade when the storm comes. He needed a deeper reason, one strong enough to carry him through the storms. So, he took out a notebook and wrote 3 words at the top, "My purpose statement." He asked himself 3 questions, just like Hill had suggested. 1. What do I truly love doing, even if no one pays me for it? 2. How does it serve others? 3. What would I give my life's best years to master? For the first time, the fog lifted. Ethan realized that his real dream wasn't to build a company, it was to build people. His products were just tools to help others believe in their potential. That was what made his heart race. The next morning, he woke up early, not out of duty, but with purpose. Over the following months, Ethan rebuilt everything, not faster, but stronger. He changed how he led his team. He started meeting each employee, asking them what they wanted from life. He built his business around service, not ego. This time, his energy felt different. His eyes carried calm instead of panic. He didn't measure success in profits but in progress, in the impact they made. Slowly, the business started growing again, customers returned, new partnerships formed, and his small team began to believe in something larger than paychecks. One evening, as they celebrated a small victory, his friend asked him, "What changed, Ethan? You're different now." Ethan smiled. "I stopped working for success. I started working for purpose." Success followed. The lesson of purpose. Mr. Hale later told him something that would stay in his heart forever. Purpose gives pain meaning. Without it, every failure feels like death. With it, every failure feels like growth. That was Napoleon Hill's philosophy too. Every successful person in his studies had a definite major purpose. They knew where they were going and why. Purpose turns struggle into strength, delay into training, and fear into fuel. When Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times, he didn't see defeat, he saw discovery. When Henry Ford was told his car idea was foolish, he didn't stop, because his purpose was bigger than opinion. That's what Ethan finally understood. Purpose doesn't remove the storm. It gives you a reason to sail through it. A test of purpose. A year later, another crisis struck. A major investor backed out. Production stalled. Ethan's team looked to him for answers. The old Ethan would have panicked. But this time, he stood tall. "We'll find a way," he said calmly. He didn't waste energy blaming anyone. He sat down with his team and found new solutions, new partners, and new ways to adapt. His purpose kept him steady. Mr. Hale visited him that week. He smiled when he saw Ethan at work. "You found it," he said. "Found what?" Ethan asked. "Your fire," the old man said. "You've learned that success is not built by hands that rush, but by hearts that burn." Ethan nodded. He finally understood that purpose was the foundation of everything. Discipline, patience, courage, all of it grew from that single seed. Final reflection: Ethan's story is the story of every person who ever failed, doubted, and rose again. Success does not start with money, talent, or luck. It starts with purpose. It is the voice that says, "I was born for this." The rich, as Napoleon Hill revealed, are not rich because they chase money. They are rich because they live with purpose so strong that money has no choice but to follow. So find your purpose. Write it. Speak it. Live it. Let it shape your days and fuel your discipline. Because once you know why you're doing something, how becomes clear, and when no longer matters. That's when success stops being a chase and becomes a calling. Sparkles. End of Part 4. The Power of Purpose. Sparkles. Next. Part 5. The Law of Belief, Turning Thought into Reality. Would you like me to continue with Part 5, 1,000 words, story style, Napoleon Hill Principles, American Friendly? Title: The Builder's Creed. Part 5, The Law of Belief. A story inspired by Napoleon Hill's success philosophy, written in clear, powerful storytelling for American readers who dream, build, and rise. Hook: The town laughed at him. When Ethan announced he was expanding his business into 3 new cities, people whispered behind his back. "He'll lose everything," they said. "He's dreaming too big again." Even his closest friend told him gently, "Ethan, be realistic. You don't have that kind of money." Ethan smiled and replied, "I don't need the money first. I need the belief first. The money will come later." That single sentence was the line between failure and fortune, and it came straight from Napoleon Hill's greatest principle. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Part 5, The Law of Belief. Months earlier, Ethan would have doubted himself. He would have listened to the world's opinions and shrunk back into fear. But after discovering his purpose, something inside him had shifted. He began to understand that success wasn't about resources, it was about resourcefulness. And that resourcefulness was powered by belief. Still, belief wasn't easy. Every time he tried to imagine expansion, fear crept in. What if it failed? What if everyone was right? One night, Mr. Hale found him sitting outside, staring at his plans. "You look like a man fighting ghosts," the old mentor said. Ethan sighed. "I know what I want, but part of me still doubts if I can do it." Mr. Hale chuckled. "Then you're like every great man who ever lived. The difference is what you do with that doubt." He leaned closer. "Belief isn't the absence of doubt, Ethan. It's the decision to act despite it." The seed of faith. That night, Mr. Hale told Ethan a story about a farmer who planted apple seeds. "There was a drought that year," he said. The neighbors laughed. They said, "You're wasting good seed." But the farmer replied, "I'm not planting for today's weather. I'm planting for tomorrow's harvest." Years later, that same orchard fed the whole town. That's belief, Mr. Hale said. You plant even when the ground looks dry. Ethan understood. Faith wasn't blind optimism, it was a disciplined expectation. It was planting effort into the soil of purpose and trusting that results would come. From that day forward, Ethan trained his mind the way athletes train their bodies. He started every morning with a ritual. He stood before the mirror, looked himself in the eye, and repeated words inspired by Napoleon Hill's self-confidence formula. I know I have the ability to achieve my definite purpose. I promise myself to take persistent, consistent action until I succeed. He didn't just say the words, he felt them. He pictured success so vividly that it began to feel real long before it arrived. The power of imagination. Ethan began visualizing every detail of his expansion, the offices, the customers, the smiles of his team. When doubt whispered, "You're dreaming too big," he answered, "That's exactly how dreams grow." Napoleon Hill had written that imagination is the workshop of the mind, where all plans are shaped. Ethan used it daily. He turned fear into focus. He stopped saying, "What if it fails?" and started saying, "What if it works?" He carried a small notebook everywhere. In it, he wrote his goals in present tense. I am building 3 thriving branches. I am leading a team that believes. I am impacting thousands through service. At first, it felt strange. But over time, his mind began accepting it as truth. His decisions grew bolder. His energy changed. People started noticing. Faith has a frequency, and others can feel it. Facing the test. Then came the test. A major investor withdrew from the project 2 weeks before launch. His team panicked. "Ethan, this could end everything," one said, but Ethan smiled. "No, it's just the universe testing if we truly believe." He gathered his team and said, "We've come too far to turn back. Belief doesn't need perfect conditions, it creates them." They adjusted their plans, worked late nights, and replaced fear with focus. Within a month, a new investor appeared, someone even better aligned with their mission. Ethan realized something powerful that night. When belief is unshakable, doors open where walls once stood. Belief as energy. Mr. Hale visited the new office after it launched. He looked around proudly. "See what belief does," he said. "It moves the invisible first, and then the visible follows." Ethan nodded. "It's strange," he said. "I didn't get new resources. I just became more certain." "That's the secret," Mr. Hale said. "Most men wait for proof before they believe. The successful believe before proof, and their belief creates the proof." Ethan realized that faith wasn't magic, it was mental alignment. It made his actions sharper, his confidence stronger, and his energy magnetic. People wanted to follow him not because of his title, but because of his certainty. As Napoleon Hill wrote, "Faith is the only known antidote for failure." The inner conversation. Months later, while walking home one evening, Ethan thought about how belief had changed him. He used to talk himself out of dreams. Now he talked himself into them. Every time fear tried to whisper, he answered with action. Belief had become his habit, not a momentary feeling, but a daily choice. He noticed how his thoughts shaped his mood, and his mood shaped his actions. He became mindful of his inner dialogue. He no longer said, "I hope," he said. "I will." He no longer asked, "Can I?" He said, "How will I?" His belief had matured into certainty. The law in action. A year later, his business flourished in 3 cities. People who once doubted him now sought his advice. A young entrepreneur asked him, "Ethan, what's your secret?" Ethan smiled. "It's not a secret. It's a law. You must believe in your goal until the world has no choice but to catch up." He told the young man what Mr. Hale once told him. Belief isn't built in a day. It's built every time you act in faith when fear tells you to quit. The legacy of faith. When Mr. Hale passed away the following year, Ethan found an envelope addressed to him. Inside was a single note that read, "The greatest investment a man can make is in his own belief. Guard it, grow it, and the world will bend to its power." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He realized that everything he had built, every success, every lesson, every victory, had begun as a belief planted in his mind. He whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Hale. and looked toward the horizon. The world had changed because he had changed. Final reflection: Napoleon Hill taught that belief transforms thought into its physical equivalent. What you hold in your mind with conviction eventually appears in your life. Ethan's story is proof. Belief gives strength to discipline, courage to persistence, and direction to purpose. It is the invisible bridge between what is and what can be. So, if you wish to rise, stop waiting to feel ready. Start believing that you already are. For once the mind accepts a dream as possible, the body, the will, and the universe itself begin to move toward it. Sparkles. End of part 5. The Law of Belief. Sparkles. Next part. 6. The Master of Mind, Building an Unbreakable Future. Final part. Would you like me to send part 6? Final part. 1000 words, story style, Napoleon Hill principles, with a motivational call to action at the end. Next. Title: The Builder's Creed, Part 6. The Master of Mind. Final part. Inspired by Napoleon Hill's timeless wisdom. A 1000-word motivational story written in simple, powerful language for every American dreamer who wants to rise, build, and live free. Hook. It was a cold morning when Ethan finally stood on the balcony of his new headquarters, the skyline stretching far beyond what he once believed possible. He remembered the small wooden desk where it all began, the nights filled with doubt, and the voice of Mr. Hale saying, "The mind is your kingdom. Rule it well, and the world will follow." Now, as the city pulsed beneath him, Ethan realized what his mentor had meant all along. The final step to success wasn't just action, belief, or patience. It was mastery of the mind. The last lesson. Years had passed since Ethan first met Mr. Hale. His business had grown beyond his wildest dreams. But one morning, after a restless night, he felt something unsettling. Despite all the success, his thoughts were scattered. His days were full of noise, meetings, plans, calls, praise. Yet deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You're drifting." He sat in his office, staring at the portrait of his old mentor. Beneath it hung a small plaque engraved with 3 words. "Stillness creates strength." He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in months, he silenced the world and listened to his own thoughts. That's when he realized success wasn't about conquering the world outside, it was about mastering the world within. The inner war. Napoleon Hill once wrote that, "You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul, because you have the power to control your thoughts." Ethan began to see how easily the mind could become its own enemy, filled with worry, fear, and distraction. He remembered the early days when his mind was sharp and focused. Every morning started with gratitude, every night ended with reflection. Now, his focus had become tangled in details. He whispered, "I built this empire, but if I lose control of my thoughts, I lose it all." So Ethan returned to the basics, to the mental discipline that had started everything. He began each day in silence. No phone, no emails, no noise. Only a notebook and his mind. He wrote 3 questions. 1. What do I want today to mean? 2. What thought will guide me? 3. What must I protect my mind from? These questions became his compass. The more he practiced mental stillness, the clearer his decisions became. The noise faded. Focus returned. He realized that true wealth was not in money, but in mental control. The battle of thoughts. One evening, while mentoring a young entrepreneur named Caleb, Ethan asked him, "What's holding you back?" Caleb hesitated. "I think too much," he said. "One day I'm confident. The next I'm afraid." Ethan smiled. "Then your problem isn't lack of opportunity. It's lack of control." He drew a line on a piece of paper. On one side he wrote faith, on the other fear. "These 2 forces live in every mind," Ethan said. "Whichever you feed wins." He leaned back and continued, "I used to feed fear. What if I fail? What if I lose? What if I'm not enough? But when I began feeding faith, everything changed. The world didn't get easier, I got stronger." Caleb nodded slowly. "So, how do you control it?" "By choosing your thoughts the way you choose your friends," Ethan said. "If a thought doesn't serve your purpose, don't entertain it." That night, Caleb left inspired. Ethan smiled, realizing that he was passing on the same fire Mr. Hale once gave him. The mind as a magnet. Over time, Ethan saw a new truth emerge. His outer results were always the reflection of his inner state. When his thoughts were disciplined, business flowed. When his mind was scattered, problems multiplied. Napoleon Hill had written in Think and Grow Rich. A mind dominated by positive emotions becomes a magnet for favorable circumstances. Ethan began to treat his mind like a sacred space. He filled it with good books, calm moments, and empowering ideas. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him to grow, not those who drained his energy. He learned to guard his attention. Because attention was the currency of power. He noticed how people wasted energy on gossip, comparison, and complaint. He once did too. But now, he invested every thought wisely. The results were undeniable. His company doubled again. His health improved. His relationships deepened. It wasn't luck. It was mental management. The power of stillness. One afternoon, Ethan visited the quiet lake near Mr. Hale's old cottage. He sat on the same bench where they once spoke. The water was still. A single leaf drifted slowly across the surface. He thought about all the men he'd met, some brilliant, some rich, many talented, but only a few truly peaceful. He whispered, "Peace is power." For the first time, he understood that success wasn't about racing faster, it was about thinking clearer. Mastery of the mind was mastery of life. You could build empires, but if your mind was restless, you were still a prisoner. You could lose everything, but if your mind was calm, you could rebuild it all. Ethan smiled. He finally understood Mr. Hale's last lesson. He who conquers himself is greater than he who conquers the world. Legacy of the mind. Years later, Ethan became known not only for his wealth, but for his wisdom. People came to him not to learn how to make money, but how to think. He told them, "Success begins and ends in the mind. Your reality is a mirror of your dominant thoughts. Control your focus, and you control your future." And when asked what separated winners from dreamers, he answered simply, "Winners don't think about success. They think from success." Ethan had mastered what Napoleon Hill called the master key. Control over the mind. It was the same force that turned dreams into empires, and fear into fuel. He no longer chased success. He had become it. The final truth. One morning, as the sun rose behind the skyline, Ethan wrote his final words in his journal. "The mind is the builder. The world is its blueprint. What I think, I become. What I believe, I create. What I master, I keep forever." He closed the journal, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Hale." He finally understood that everything, every triumph, every test, every delay, had one purpose: to teach him how to master himself. That was the real treasure. Final reflection. The Napoleon Hill way. Hill taught that success is a spiritual and mental law. The world responds not to wishes, but to vibration, the emotional tone of your thoughts. If your mind is filled with fear, you attract more to fear. If your mind is filled with faith, purpose, and gratitude, you attract opportunities, strength, and wealth. Ethan's story proves that riches first appear in the mind, long before they exist in the world. Master your thoughts, and you master your destiny. Fire call to action. If Ethan's journey inspired you, don't just read, apply. Start mastering your mind today. Blue Book. Step 1. Choose one powerful belief and live by it. Flex biceps. Step 2. Replace every fear with one action. Fire. Step 3. Build daily habits that make your future inevitable. Remember, wealth begins in the mind. The stronger your belief, the greater your world becomes. If this story moved you, share it, comment your favorite lesson, and subscribe for more timeless wisdom inspired by Napoleon Hill. Because your greatest power is already within you, and your richest life begins the moment you decide to think, act, and believe like the rich.